Hello all, and thanks for joining this session of the Chief Revenue Officers Summit. I know that this is a time of year when everyone is setting their budgets and quotas for the coming year. And so as I was thinking about how we might use our time together today, I thought it might make sense to chat a bit about how to make sure that the annual plans we're going to sign up to soon are set up to make us successful. It's a process that should get us not only to a number that we can live with, but one that allows every CRO here to exceed their goal every time. I've talked with leaders at many companies about their goal-setting processes, and I hear a lot of ideas. Years ago, I worked with a sales leader whose big idea was that if we could just get every sales rep to sell one more deal, we'll make the number. Of course, there wasn't really a plan for how to do that, but she seemed to believe that if we stood up at sales kickoff in January and told our reps to close an extra deal this year, it would somehow magically happen. As if they had a pile of deals that they could do, but which they hadn't been getting around to for laziness or lack of interest in the extra commission or something like that. Maybe you've worked at a company that had a product that they were excited about, and the sales strategy for the year was just bundle this product into every new deal going forward. Or maybe you've spoken with a sales leader who told you that their board wants to see 10% growth. And so without too much other planning, you're just going to raise quotas by 10% and hire another rep or two as cushion. Now I'm a marathon runner, and I really want to qualify for the Boston Marathon. But I know that I can't get there by just telling myself each day I'll run a mile 5 seconds faster than I did the day before. Eventually the math catches up to you, and it catches up on these sorts of plans as well. Now, thinking about performance limits, I remember a sales leader who decided that their next year was going to be one that was all about accountability and exceptional performance management. They told me that in their kickoff, they planned to be really clear that they would not tolerate non-performance. And so they signed off on an annual goal that assumed that every rep would achieve 100% of their quota, and then they threatened to replace any reps who didn't make that goal. Of course, there was a ton of turnover following that strategy, either from people who got fired or great reps who found themselves better jobs out of fear that the axe would be coming to get them soon too. The company learned that you can't cut your way to greatness, and this particular annual plan failed. Now the problem, of course, is that these are all business plans that ignore the fact that on the other end of these equations are humans who have their own skills, abilities, and motivations that aren't quite captured in those neat little spreadsheets. Now when we put them up on a slide like this and describe them so casually, they seem doomed to fail on their face. But I'll bet if I was to go around the audience today and ask if any of you have ever had an annual strategy tied to plans like these, I suspect more than a few of us would say, yes, I've worked under those plans, and I've done it more than once. And so collectively, we know what happens. We spend the big money on the splashy sales kickoff in January, and we announce the big move. Sell one more deal this year. Give 10% less discount when negotiating. Don't close a deal without adding one extra item onto the invoice. Come February, we see that a couple of reps have been able to implement the gimmick of the moment, but most of them haven't quite done it yet. And by March, it's really clear that not every rep in every deal is going to be able to use this particular tactic. And the quarter closes having fallen short of whatever the quota was for the first 3 months. So what's the message of the QBRs come April? We're starting Q2 in a hole because we didn't quite achieve our goal. But you know, there's 9 months left in the year, and that's more than enough time to double down on our efforts and really fill that gap. So don't forget, sell one more deal. Add one more product to your invoice. Negotiate 10% less of a discount every single time. And then May and June roll by, and we get largely the same results. The CFO gets nervous about 2 quarters in a row of missed numbers, and so cost-cutting measures are put in place. Hiring freezes delay important projects, and there's pressure to not only hit your original plan for Q3, but also increased expectations to start filling the gap. Reps hit the halfway point of the year. They start to worry that they're not going to achieve their quota. They see the pressure increasing, and they leave for other sales jobs. Which, incidentally, did any of you notice that post-COVID there are a ton of sales openings and people are prioritizing salespeople as one of the first jobs that they're rehiring for? So your reps have lots of opportunities to go to, and you've got a really tight labor market to find replacements. The downward spiral continues. Fewer reps means more missed goals, which means higher expectations to catch up to, which means more pressure for the reps that are left, so morale plummets further, and more people leave, and on, and on, and on. And suddenly, we're back at the end of the year, making another annual plan. And if we ask the leadership what they've learned, or how they're doing annual planning this time around, very little has changed. Now, we've all heard that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again with the expectation that we're going to get a different result. And as a leader, you're now starting your second year, really hoping that it's going to be different this time around. This study by Gong concludes what a lot of other analysts have found as well, and that's that the average tenure of a VP of sales is about 1.5 years. 6 quarters. So that really would mean that you have a year of missed expectations, and then you really need to make the Q1 of next year really work out well, or your company will be spending Q2 finding your replacement. The main reason a VP of sales gets replaced? Their teams don't hit revenue expectations. And I believe that one of the main reasons that happens isn't that they're not good salespeople, or good leaders, or hard workers. It's because the expectations were not achievable in the first place. Now, I got into technology sales right as I finished a PhD in social science. And as a result, I've spent my career thinking a lot about what it's like to operate at the intersection of business and humanity. And I believe that's why, when I think about all of those business plans on how we were going to make the number, I believe they failed because they were all business and didn't pay any attention to the human element that's sitting in the seat doing the actual work. What about the business plans that assume every rep will be in the seat, contributing 100% of their quota for the entirety of the year? Life happens. They'll have babies. They'll take maternity and paternity leaves. Someone will have a medical emergency in their family. The best seller will decide that they want to change careers and open a yoga studio. For those in the seats, yes, it makes mathematical sense that if we could give away 10% less of a discount in every deal, we would do 10% better as a company. But is that really feasible? Have we reviewed recordings of our negotiation calls or gotten any other market data that tells us that those buyers actually had another 10% to give? Whatever the case, we're setting ourselves up for failure if we build plans that expect perfection rather than the messy realities that humanity brings to work every day. So the big message that you'll take away from me today is that if you want your teams to achieve success and create longevity for yourself in your own role, you want to ground next year's annual plan in a solid understanding of what these actual humans have actually done in the past, and then use those insights as the basis of building a go-forward plan that actual humans can perform against. Yes, your company is going to bring exciting new products to market, and you'll do some training and process improvements that bring you incremental gains over whatever last year's performance was. And we will want to include some of those assumptions about their impacts into the annual plan, but they should be there only as cautious bets, not as critical keystones required to make the plan. In fact, if we do them right, we'll have a baseline plan that doesn't rely on any of those new factors, so when they pay off, they lead to overperformance instead of being the failure point that prevents us from ever hitting our goal. Now, this notion of building an annual plan around past performance of my actual sellers is a notion that I was introduced to a few years back, and it really made sense when it was explained to me. And once I adopted it, I've never missed a quarterly or an annual goal ever since. A plan that recognizes our humanity means that my reps have targets that are attainable. They will make quota, which helps them earn bigger commissions that results in them being happier and more loyal to the company as a result. My CFO and my board see a track record of my team repeatedly hitting goals and often exceeding our budget, which means that I get less scrutiny during our board meetings, which makes my own life happier as a result. So let's take a look at how we get there in a simple 6-step process. Our first step is to use historical performance data to identify expected sales performance. Past performance is generally the best indicator of future performance. So when you want to know what your team is going to do next year, take a look at what they did this year and the year before. Now hopefully you've got this in some sort of a data cube, whether that be Salesforce.com or a spreadsheet or something else. We'll want to start by identifying 2 types of reps. The tenured reps that you think have been around long enough and are fully ramped and up to speed, and then the group of employees who are new hires or still in their onboarding process. Maybe you're at a large company that's hired a few waves of reps over the past few quarters, and you might need to break them up into a few different classes to look at. But in each of these groups, we want to get a shape of what their typical performance looks like over the last year or two. So for reps that have been around a while, what's the typical cadence for them, month by month, quarter by quarter, and year by year? How much revenue do they generate, and how many opportunities is that comprised of? If you know it, you might also get a sense for what it took to lead up to those closed deals, how many meetings, demonstrations, and phone calls it took them. But if you don't have that data yet, it can be a project for another time. For our newly hired reps, we ask the same question, but we want to see how the ramping process for them was. How many months did it take for them to get to their first sale? How long did it take until their sales volume matched your tenured reps? What was their monthly performance across this onboarding period? With these questions answered, we can start building a month-by-month spreadsheet that includes each of your team members, where they are in their ramping period, and what their expectations of results should be. Now the result is a look at what month number 1, 2, 3, 12, and 24 might look like for a typical seller. Here's an example of a sales team with 4 fully ramped sellers, which you see up on the top white lines, and that's Ariana, Kaylin, Jake, and Kyle. And then down below are 3 new sellers in various stages of onboarding. Now this company doesn't hit full production until their 6th month, so you see that they've got different cells for each of the months showing which part of the ramp they're in. And so we can see that Rose won't be hitting full performance until June, while Janae has just 2 months left in her ramping period, and Rex has 3. Now here's a look at that with actual numbers, where a fully ramped seller produces $100,000 a month, and different onboarding periods show us that it's slow going at first, and then it really spikes up towards the end of the training period. Considering the impacts of ramping in your annual plan will make a huge difference in getting you to an attainable number. But you're not ready to sign off on this number with your CFO just yet. We also want to consider the impact of turnover. Now in this step, we're really going to plan for turnover throughout the year, both voluntary turnover by the rep and involuntary turnover that you'll initiate. For the voluntary turnover, we know that every one of us works at a place that's a great place to work, but some number of people will still decide to leave for other opportunities. Depending on the size of your team, you may have really close relationships and know about planned career changes or maternity leaves or retirements and things like that. And so if you already know about those individual plans, go ahead and bake them into the model. Even if we don't know the specifics though, a great place to start is to work with your HR team and look at past behavior. What percentage of your reps voluntarily left the company last year, and what about the year before? Is it a relatively stable number, or is it increasing or declining? Take a look at the shape of those departures. Do they tend to happen at a particular time of year, maybe following the payout of annual bonuses or some other critical event? On our spreadsheet, we'll want to model out a number of departures, along with our best guess at their timing, so that we're not putting ourselves on the hook to deliver revenue from a rep that we know won't be there. And so here we've added a red line that zeroes out someone's performance from above, beginning in February. And then since we think it's going to take HR about 60 days to recruit and hire a replacement rep, we start a new line of ramping quota starting 2 months later. Now we also know that you'll choose to let some poor performers go, and these need to be planned for too. As you work on this part of the plan, ask yourself, do you have individuals that you already know you need to exit in the coming year? model them in. Again, work with HR to determine how many involuntary terminations you executed last year and plan for similar actions around the same times this year. Or maybe you already know that you're going to be more proactive on performance management in the coming year, so you might want to reserve some additional slots for rep departures under this new plan. The beauty of planning this out ahead of time is that you're giving yourself relief for the things your head knows are going to happen, or your heart tells you should happen, in order to achieve success over the long term. Now let's think back to those flawed plans that we talked about at the start of this session. All too often, companies fail to plan for anything less than a fully staffed team. The result is that they hold on to underperforming reps for longer than they should because they believe that getting 25% performance from someone in the seat is better than getting 0 performance from somebody who's not in the organization at all. But of course, what could be even better is to get rid of the 25% performer, suffer through 6 months of onboarding someone new, and then enjoying the benefits of an 80% performer who's taken their place. It's a lesson that we learn when we're forced to do the unexpected adjustments with a surprise departure of an employee who quits one day. But if we plan for some turnover, even if we can't identify the specific rep by name, we won't be scrambling to cover the expectations of a fully onboarded and ramped seller who surprisingly goes missing one day. So here's a look of what that looks like in our spreadsheet. I've added a row of negative performance for a planned departure in February, even if I don't know exactly who's going to leave after they cash the last big acceleration check from last year. We want to be realistic on how effective our recruiting process is and how long it takes to typically identify, recruit, and hire a new seller. And so in this instance, I've expected a pretty quick 60-day turnaround to backfill that February departing rep, and so I baked the replacement quota in to start ramping in April. At this point, I sum the columns, and I get what I call the baseline sales expectation for our annual plan. Now, ever since I started building plans with just these assumptions we've put in so far, I knew that I was signing up for a number that I was much more confident in hitting than ever before. Of course, there's always pressure from my colleagues and my board to do more than what this calculation yields, and we'll begin that negotiation with step 3, where we place some strategic bets and communicate their risks. Now be clear, if you can sign off on an annual number without these bets, absolutely do so. But the truth is, you'll need to compare your baseline sales expectation to a number that your leadership team would like it to be. And if it doesn't show the growth that they want to see, and at this point, it probably doesn't, we need to think about what strategic actions we can take in the coming year to close the gap. Now, some steps we might do here are to consider whether we can add additional headcount. Have conversations around how many you have budget for and on what time frame, and then we can model those additional ramping reps into our plan. If that's a bet you're making, we'll want to be confident that you have enough territory in your total addressable market so that you won't cannibalize the performance of your existing reps with just additional headcounts coming on board. If we're planning major amounts of headcount growth, we need to ground that in some pretty serious territory planning projects as well. Now, another strategic bet you might make is in the launch of a new marketing or training program that can raise performance. If it's one you've done before, make sure you're having conversations with all the stakeholders to get a realistic agreement on what month you should start seeing the results paying off from them. The nature of humanity is that we take a while to learn new things. If you've ever started an exercise plan or a diet, you know that it takes at least 8 weeks to build a new habit. And so when you think about the potential effects of a new training program, know that you're not going to double your pipeline overnight. Give your people time to experiment with the new technique, and actually expect that performance might dip slightly before it improves as people make mistakes and learn from them. We would expect to see a similar adoption curve if you're bringing new products to market. It takes a while for the product team to have them ready to sell, and for the sellers to learn how to talk about them, and even longer to get the first wins referenceable enough to accelerate future wins. So, if we've had some good collaborations across the relevant departments, we can place some bets on increased sales from these sorts of motions, but we want to document our assumptions around when they'll be ready to sell and how long it will take to get 1, 2, and 10 sales from them. Here's how those adjustments might look to get you from your expected sales to your final plan. Now, I really like to break them out as separate line items in our plan so that it's really clean and easy to talk with colleagues about what our assumptions were and what the risks of failure would be too. If we find ourselves missing our June number, we can take a deeper dive into why. Have we had more turnover than we modeled? Is the new product delayed? Was the training plan slow in rolling out? These are some data points we can come back to explain why we are where we are at any point in time, as well as manage expectations on how the course correction might go. It's really not possible to over-communicate with your leadership team on the various assumptions, making sure that they're all actually bought off on the plan and how you got there, rather than just signing up for a number without a reason to believe that it's attainable. Now, these conversations are what makes strategies different than the hopeful assumptions that many folks use for budget planning. Because if they aren't supported with data and investment to make them happen, they shouldn't go into the plan. Now with these data, we have a grand total on our spreadsheet that I would feel really comfortable as setting for our annual goal next year. My next 3 steps in annual planning then are more about expectation management than they are about arriving at the right annual revenue number. So up to this point, we've created a pretty elaborate spreadsheet that gives us a realistic revenue plan that takes us month by month through the year. It also provides the foundation to clearly connect the investments you need in terms of headcount, training, and new product to improve performance, as well as the timing implications of each of those strategic bets. Now we want to see what we can do to break that number down into quarterly goals that will hold everyone accountable to. As you finalize your sales expectations, take into account the seasonality of the business. So far, our calculations have assumed consistent production from fully ramped reps all across the year. So we're looking at tenured reps with a $1.2 million revenue goal, and we're expecting them to deliver $100,000 of that every month across the year. Yet we know that many businesses have a seasonality to them. Maybe you're a business that sees lots of end-of-year sales in Q4 that's tied to holiday spending. Or maybe you're front-loaded with Q1 buyers who want a new product to help them deliver their new year. It changes depending on industry. Some industries see slower sales in the summer months while buyers are on vacation, while others are in businesses that boom as people get ready for back-to-school calendars. Whatever drives your seasonality, look at your historic trends to figure out what percentage of your revenue happens in each quarter or in each month, and then apply this shape to your final plan with your management team. Now, getting back to the humanity of our business, teams also perform better when they're building on a sense of success. And so for this reason, I like to lower the expectations for the first quarter of the year so that they come out of the gates winning, even if that means I have to raise expectations to make up for it a little bit later on. When we have a successful Q1, the morale of the team is much better than if they miss their first quarter. Success builds on success, and it's way more fun to be ahead of your quota than always needing to play catch-up, not to mention dealing with all of the cost-cutting measures that most CFOs will want to put in place as soon as they see any deviation from their plan. For yourself, lowering Q1 expectations in the plan also sets you up as a leader who meets or beats expectations quarter after quarter, rather than being one who misses all year long but manages to save it at the very end. Now, the adjustments don't need to be very big, just a couple of percentage points to ensure that the team will meet or exceed their Q1 plan. Here's a look at the last 2 years of a sample organization's performance. In Q1, based on history, this team should do between 23 and 24% of their annual business in the first quarter. But if we set the Q1 target at only 20%, they'll finish that quarter ahead of plan. Our team will feel like winners. You'll get to report to the board that you beat expectations and you're entering Q2 in a really good place. So now let's look at Q2. Previous performance would say that this team will have done between 43 and 45% of their annual goal at the conclusion of the first half of the year. Now, I would set a Q2 goal of 22%. It's close enough to history that it's not unrealistic, but it also sets a budget of just 42% of the number in the first half of the year. So if history repeats itself and you actually do that 43 to 45%, You're entering the second half of the year as a winner. It's also a great place to head off to those 4th of July barbecues with, continuing the culture of winning. Now, of course, at some point, we need to pay the piper. So in Q3, we've set a bit higher expectation. However, we've already banked in some overperformance from the first 2 quarters. And so even though history tells us that this quarter will only do 20% of the year's revenue, which misses the 22% revenue target I've put here, the overperformance in the first half puts this team at 64% of plan, right in the middle of that 63 to 65% that they did in prior years. Reps are going to feel like they might have slipped a tiny bit and they need to step up their efforts in Q4, but you're still going into your board meetings with an annual performance that is right on target for the business. And that just leaves us with the 4th quarter to finish out. And a final target of 36% fits right in the middle of the 35 to 37% actuals that we saw in previous quarters. It's a safe bet that it isn't going to have me pulling out my hair at the end of the year, wondering if I'm going to make the number. And if we've really done it right, we're basically at our goal right around Thanksgiving time, letting me enjoy family and be almost fully unplugged for work during the 2 to 3 weeks of Christmas and New Year holidays. Now we can carry this a step further by applying a similar shape to the months inside your quarter. There are very few companies I've been to that do an even 33% of the quarter every month, even though their budgets anticipate that, as I've put here in the light blue bars. But since that doesn't really match with reality, I like to shape the quarter a bit differently. The other blue bars here show 30% in month 1, 30% in month 2, and 40% in month 3. It's not a huge shift from the 33% peanut buttered across the board, but it makes it easier to feel success of hitting or exceeding goal for 2 months in a row, and then lets you hit the 3rd month, which has a higher expectation, with a little bit of money already in the bank. By setting the seasonality of the months within each quarter in a way that motivates our humans in the right way, we again have a really great culture. Now, I also really like to think about those key holidays in each quarter, knowing that your clients are going to take Labor Day vacations or being out on Passover and Easter, and I try to model my sales motions around those known bits of humanity that shape our customers' lives and our sellers' non-business lives. With this plan agreed to by your management team, it's now time to set quotas for your sellers. Many individual contributors and a lot of first-time managers assume that the expectations we've been talking about so far and the assigned quota are the same thing. But as we've already talked about, a company that assumes that every rep will achieve 100% of the assigned quota is destined to fail. No team is going to have perfect execution against plan with every seller, with no unusual attrition every single month of the year. Our spreadsheet so far tells us what the business should count on reps actually doing, but we want to motivate our teams to do a little bit more than this baseline expectation. And in fact, what we know about humans is that they perform best when they're chasing a goal that's slightly out of reach, but still in sight. If they're reaching for a goal that is easily attainable, they lay back and relax. But if they see a goal that's in front of them that they think they can reach, and they just have to stretch a bit harder, they'll dig just a slight bit deeper within themselves than they would for that much easier goal. Now, my general rule of thumb is that you've got a happy sales team if 80% of your sellers are making at least 80% of their quota 80% of the time, and then we'll see a handful of folks overperforming significantly. When we find those overperformers, we broadcast their success really widely, making a big deal about those $1 million commission checks. Because again, that humanity tells us people love to have a hero that they can look up to and want to be like, even if the typical seller can't quite get to that level of success themselves. Showing them an example of it being possible and a real person actually getting a real reward for achieving that goal does a lot for team motivation. You can find that balance of a goal that's a stretch to be attainable, visible but not quite in reach, if you take the expectations that we've built in our spreadsheet and add in a 15 to 20% cushion to those goals, and then manage your sellers to the quota, not the baseline budget expectation that's in our business plan. That breakage is one of the little secrets that a lot of senior managers keep really quiet. But generally, a sales manager's quota should have between 5 and 10% relief from the sum of their team's quotas. And as the leader, you should get a little bit more. Ideally, you've targeted your own quota to the business budget rather than the quota on the street attainment. Now, as a bonus, your CFO will like to see that you've budgeted for more quota on the street than they're actually expecting in revenue for the year. It should save them small bits of commission dollars across the vast majority of sellers who will finish their year in the 90 to 95% attainment zone. And then the CFO can give you those dollars to pay out really compelling accelerators or give really meaningful rewards to the handful of sellers that blow their number out of the water. So, that's how we set annual plans with humanity, ensuring that we beat our goal every time. Done right, we've set a business budget that historic data proves we should be able to achieve, and we've made a few additional bets in training improvements and new product launches that should have some back-pocketed wins baked in for over and above kinds of performance. We've accommodated for the reality that human life events will disrupt some of our best laid plans. We've given reps goals that stretch them a bit more than what their historic performance has shown they're capable of, and we've motivated them to try harder. We've adjusted the calendar to encourage a culture of continuous winning and help you overachieve budget expectations when reps continue to actually perform. The risks we're taking in this plan create a lot of incremental opportunities to beat expectations, rather than just providing a menu of places where missing the mark is going to cause trouble. So our culture of winning continues to be nurtured across the team. And so now, I'm curious to hear what you think. We don't have the capability to do live questions and answers from all attendees today, but I've published my notes on LinkedIn where I'd love for you to share your own comments and experiences with annual planning. You'll find details from this presentation online at bit.ly/JDMQS, that's JD Miller Quota Setting, which is a short link that'll redirect you to the right place online to participate in the conversation. I'll look forward to engaging with you there. In the meantime, best of luck with your annual goal setting and creating a business plan that allows all of the humans in your business to achieve greatness.